Welcome to the Nuchi Health Podcast, where we provide credible, no-hype health, wellness, and nutrition information that actually moves the needle towards better long-term health. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Nuchi Health Podcast, our final episode in our series all about helping you find your food fit, a plan for how to structure your everyday eating in a way that fits with your lifestyle, preferences, health goals, budget, and more. Because how we choose to fuel our bodies is one of the most influential factors of our current and future health. In today's episode, we're going to cover a few additional approaches we haven't discussed thus far, and then quickly review everything we've covered in this series, focusing on the pros and cons of each approach and what eating styles will likely work best for certain health goals or health conditions compared to others. The point of this series was to give you a solid understanding of a variety of different dietary approaches so that you could find an eating pattern that's sustainable for you in the long term. Extreme diets generally don't work and can do more harm than good when it comes to long-term health. We want you to find a healthy way of eating that you enjoy, that you can truly stick with in the longer term, and that is consistently improving your health rather than consistently harming your health. And the good news is, for most people, there are many different ways you can achieve this. There is no one size fits all, and in fact, several sizes or approaches could work for you. So it's about understanding your options and then trying on different options for size to find what makes you feel good, what makes you look forward to eating occasions but not obsess over them, what keeps your weight in a healthy range without feeling deprived, what optimizes your metabolic health and keeps those parameters like blood sugar, blood pressure, blood lipids, and body fat in healthy ranges. So what's on the docket for today? I want to mention a few less popular approaches that might benefit those with particular special needs. These are going to be additional elimination type diets, an approach for people who like to eat large volumes of food to feel satisfied, the concept of intuitive eating, a few commercially available plans, and then how you would adjust any of the approaches we've discussed thus far if you're aiming to lose weight. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I encourage you to add them to your playlist, particularly if you want a deeper dive into the Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, intermittent fasting, plant-based diets, low carb, ketogenic, Whole30, and or paleo. We covered all of those and a few more in our previous episodes 2 through 7. If you have questions about some of the terminology in today's episode, Episode 1 provides a nice overview of basic nutrition terms and concepts, so that's a great place to start. For today, I want to wrap up with a mention of a few less popular or less well-known approaches. First, elimination diets. Elimination or exclusion diets can be short-term or lifelong, depending on a person's needs and condition, but they involve removal of foods or food groups that may cause adverse reactions or allergic responses with the goal to identify foods that contribute to symptoms related to food allergies and intolerances, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, autoimmune conditions, and the like. The goal of these approaches is not weight loss, but rather to identify foods that exacerbate symptoms or a condition so that a person can have relief from those symptoms and better manage their condition. With that goal in mind, elimination diets can start with a narrow focus if a particular sensitivity is already suspected, such as dairy or gluten, or they can take a broad approach, eliminating many common culprits at once, and then adding them back in one at a time to identify problematic foods. Whole30 is an example we covered in episode 7, which eliminates many food groups for 30 days, including alcohol, grains, legumes, dairy, processed foods, and added sugars, then adds them back one by one in the reintroduction phase. There are many variations of elimination diets out there. Whole30 is a popular one. Another one is the Autoimmune Protocol, or AIP. The AIP diet is born from and similar to the Paleo diet, which we also covered in episode 7. in the types of foods it allows or encourages you to avoid. However, it's more strict and it focuses on autoimmune wellness by replacing foods that can trigger negative autoimmune responses with nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory foods aimed to reduce the symptoms associated with autoimmune disorders. Like paleo, the goal is to eliminate all processed foods, grains, legumes, dairy, alcohol, refined sugars, and refined oils like most seed oils. This also means no processed meats like sausages, deli meats, bacon, and no sugar substitutes like stevia, sucralose, and aspartame. By eliminating processed foods, you're also eliminating any chemical additives, artificial colorings and flavorings, natural flavors, and refined sugars like high fructose corn syrup and even regular table sugar. There are some natural foods that some consume on paleo that are initially excluded on AIP, such as nightshade plants. These are eggplant, tomatoes, white potatoes, bell peppers, hot peppers, tomatillos, pimentos, and many others. You can find a full list of nightshades and all of the other foods you're avoiding on this plan on the links that we'll provide in the show notes. Eggs, nuts, and seeds, including coffee and cocoa, are also eliminated in the core elimination foods of AIP. However, this has evolved relatively recently to include a less stringent protocol that many practitioners say works just as well. The less stringent elimination grouping is called the modified elimination foods, and you can include some originally excluded foods like rice, ghee, legumes, except for soy, and seeds, including coffee and cocoa. So you can see why the modified version is much more tolerable for people. The goal is to eliminate the foods on the elimination list for at least 30 days, but you may need up to 90 days depending on your individual circumstances. You'll know when it's time for the reintroduction phase if you have measurable improvements in your symptoms from baseline, ideally with relief of symptoms after at least 30 days of following this elimination phase. Similar to Whole30, there's a preferred sequence and timing for reintroduction of various foods and food groups that were eliminated, aiming to reintroduce first the most nutrient-dense and the foods that are least likely to cause a reaction, and then the less nutrient-dense foods more likely to cause a reaction last. We'll put a link to detailed instructions on all of this in the show notes, but foods to reintroduce first are going to include egg yolks, certain milder legumes if you followed that stricter elimination without the legumes in it, fruit, berry, and seed-based spices, and certain nut and seeds oils, followed by actual nuts and seeds in the next stage of reintroduction. The most problematic foods that should be saved for later in reintroduction are going to include your nightshades and spices derived from them. These are things like paprika, cayenne, gluten-free cereal grains like corn and oats, certain legumes, including many beans, and alcohol. You may be thinking after hearing this incredibly long list of restricted foods that an elimination diet would be very difficult to follow. And yes, following a very restrictive diet for at least 30 days or perhaps longer can be challenging for many people. The people who might want to consider such an extreme approach are going to be those people who have an autoimmune condition or unexplained symptoms such as more than occasional gastrointestinal issues of gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, chronic joint pain, arthritis, Hashimoto's, ulcerative colitis, and or skin conditions like psoriasis and eczema. In these instances, it can really help improve symptoms to identify foods that aggravate your condition, and an elimination diet is the way to do that. That said, if you do have a medical condition, working with a naturopathic doctor, registered dietitian, allergist or immunologist, or specialist in functional or integrative medicine is really recommended so that they can guide you on the best approach for your individual needs. If you don't have access to those, however, these general approaches can be a good place to start and are going to be safe for most people. Due to the very restrictive nature of them, though, it's important to plan your meals and ensure you're consuming enough calories and enough protein to maintain a healthy weight and lean mass. Another type of elimination diet commonly used in people with irritable bowel syndrome or IBS and or people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO is a low FODMAP diet. FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. They're a group of short-chain carbohydrates and sugar alcohols that are poorly absorbed in the small intestine and can cause digestive discomfort in some people. Oligosaccharides include fructans found in foods like wheat, onions, garlic, and certain vegetables, and galactans or galacto-oligosaccharides, GOS, found in legumes. Lactose is a disaccharide found in dairy products, and fructose is a monosaccharide sugar found in fruits, honey, high fructose corn syrup, and some vegetables as well. Polyols include sorbitol and mannitol, which can be found naturally in some fruits and vegetables respectively, but are also often used as sugar substitutes in sugar-free products. Because these can be poorly absorbed and reach the large intestine largely intact, they can be fermented by the gut bacteria, which can result in gas, bloating, and abdominal pain. FODMAPs can also pull water into the intestine, which can result in diarrhea, but they can also alter gut motility, which can cause constipation. So really, they can have a wide range of effects, all related to gastrointestinal issues and discomfort. Therefore, a diet low in these FODMAPs can help people who are sensitive to them. Some who believe they're sensitive to gluten found in wheat, barley, and rye are actually sensitive to FODMAPs. And we know this from studies where people self-identified as gluten sensitive and they were given pure gluten or fructan, a FODMAP that's also found in wheat. There were significant differences in gastrointestinal symptom scores for fructans versus placebo, but not for gluten. I wouldn't say this is a definitive finding, but if you think you may be sensitive to gluten, but still have occasional unexplained digestive issues, those days where you don't know what you ate that upset your stomach, but something triggered you, a low FODMAP diet might be worth a try. In any case, it's an elimination diet similar to those we've already discussed. It's not meant to be followed long-term, but rather to help you identify troublesome foods so that you can avoid them. On a low FODMAP diet, you aim to swap foods with high levels of FODMAPs for low FODMAP alternatives, and we'll link to several how-to resources with food lists. High FODMAP vegetables include artichoke, asparagus, cauliflower, garlic, onions, and sugar snap peas. You'd swap these for bok choy, green bell pepper, carrot, cucumber, lettuce, zucchini, for instance. Apples, cherries, mangoes, peaches, pears, and plums are high FODMAP fruits, whereas cantaloupe, kiwi, mandarins, oranges, and pineapples are low FODMAP. There are many resources that can provide lists of these and searchable databases for high and low FODMAP foods. We'll link those in the show notes as well. To follow this diet, it's going to be similar to the other elimination diets. You'll follow a low FODMAP diet for 2 to 6 weeks, and then go through a reintroduction phase for another 8 to 12 weeks where you reintroduce one FODMAP at a time, one food at a time, over a 3-day period and monitor your tolerance. Afterwards, you should be able to have teased out what you can and can't tolerate in terms of a variety of these FODMAP foods. There's an app from the University of Monash, which is where this diet originated, that walks you through the steps of the diet, but it does have a nominal cost. Other apps are also available that allow you to look up the FODMAP levels of different foods. We'll link to the University of Monash website and other resources that you can explore for this approach. That covers the elimination diets. Of course, there are many variations out there, but if you believe you have a sensitivity, starting with a low FODMAP diet or the AIP approach will likely help you narrow down your sensitivities. Working with a professional is encouraged if that is feasible for you. Next, I want to mention a program called Volumetrics. Some people really like to consume a large volume of food to feel satisfied, but unless you need a large number of calories per day to maintain your body weight, or you're looking to gain weight, eating large volumes and maintaining healthy weight don't often go hand in hand. Volumetrics is an approach created by a professor of nutrition at Penn State, Dr. Barbara Rolls, that categorizes foods by energy density to help identify foods that you can eat more of and still lose or maintain body weight. Low energy density means a food contains relatively few calories per unit of weight or volume, and therefore you can consume more of it than energy-dense foods. There are 4 categories of foods in volumetrics. Category 1 includes the free foods, which are fruits, non-starchy vegetables like broccoli, tomatoes, mushrooms, and broth-based soups. Category 2 includes reasonable portions of whole grains, lean proteins, legumes, and low-fat dairy. Category 3 starts to get into the higher energy density foods, so the approach promotes smaller portions of these, including breads, desserts, cheese, and higher fat meats. And then category 4 is very high energy density, and you want to consume those sparingly. That's going to be your oils, things like chips, nuts, and butter. With this approach, you aim for 3 meals, 2 snacks, and a dessert each day, and you aim to increase your daily steps over a period of weeks up to 10,000 steps per day. Now, I don't mention this approach because I necessarily agree with all of the recommendations or promote the diet. Instead, I want to highlight that some people are volume eaters and do better on plans where large volumes of food can be consumed. In that case, focusing on filling up with low energy density foods like non-starchy vegetables is going to be important to maintain energy balance. You can calculate the energy density of a food by dividing the calories by the weight of the food in grams. Low calorie density is below about 1.5 calories per gram, whereas high calorie density is above 4 calories per gram of a certain food. Another approach that's gained popularity through social media is called intuitive eating. Intuitive eating focuses on listening to your body's hunger and fullness cues rather than following restrictive diets. It promotes a healthy and balanced relationship with food. We're not going to do a deep dive into this one. It originated with a book called Intuitive Eating, a Revolutionary Program That Works, and that was first published in 1995. There have been several revisions and new editions released as the research in this space has evolved, so I would encourage you to check out the latest book if you're interested in this approach. There are 10 core principles presented in the book around intuitive eating and your relationship with food and your body. I think it's a great premise. You're supposed to learn how to recognize and respond to natural hunger signals, as well as finding ways to address your emotions without turning to food. However, unless you're working with a professional trained in this area, I think it's a pretty hard concept to follow individually, especially since so many people have really lost the ability to respond properly to our hunger and satiety cues. That's partly psychological, but it's also physiological. The ultra-processed foods in our food supply are designed to be hyperpalatable, engineered to be extremely appealing and pleasurable, and they trigger a release of dopamine in the brain. They often combine high levels of sugar, fat, salt, and flavoring that activate strong cravings, and they're often less satiating than real whole foods. So not only do you crave more, you overeat because those natural satiety cues are not activated. I'm not saying intuitive eating can't work, but the odds are stacked against you if you're consuming processed foods while you aim to eat intuitively. So while I appreciate the body positivity and messages around intuitive eating, if you want to try this approach, I recommend buying that latest edition of the book, working with a nutrition professional who specializes in this approach, if that's an option for you, and focusing on a whole foods approach, which is going to make listening to your body's hunger and satiety cues much more attainable. Many insurance companies will cover certain nutrition counseling activities, so you can check what benefits might be available to you if you have insurance coverage in the US. This series has been all about covering a wide variety of approaches to nutrition in hopes you find something that resonates with you, that you think to yourself, that sounds like foods I enjoy eating, and I feel like this approach works with my lifestyle. There are many other options we didn't cover, particularly commercially available programs like the Mayo Clinic diet, Weight Watchers. All of these types of programs are going to be based on some variation of what we've covered in this series. In fact, the Mayo Clinic offers several different approaches within their plan, including healthy keto, Mediterranean, and a higher protein option specifically designed for individuals starting or on weight loss medications like GLP-1 receptor agonists to help maintain muscle mass with weight loss. I'm not going to recommend a particular commercially available plan, but if you like to have more guidance and specific direction on exactly what to eat with meal plans and recipes, these types of things might be helpful for you. Most of them have apps to help you track various things and provide program-related material. Still, you want to have in mind which type of approach you're more likely to stick with and benefit from based on your individual preferences and health status. That's what I hope this series has been able to provide you, the information to make an informed choice on a sustainable eating pattern, whether it be more of a lifestyle approach like the Mediterranean or intermittent fasting, or more prescriptive like some of these commercial options. The goal of this series was not to get you to go on a diet. Though many people could benefit from getting into a healthy weight range, I care more about you shifting your eating patterns to healthier foods and a sustainable long-term approach that benefits you. The weight loss and improvement in metabolic parameters will follow when you find an eating pattern that works for you and doesn't feel like work. However, I do want to touch briefly on adapting any of these plans specifically to lose weight. We talked about the concept of calories in episode 1. Calories are just a unit of energy, and how many of them you need per day in order to gain, maintain, or lose weight will depend on a variety of factors, such as your basal metabolic rate, your age, your physical activity level, many other factors. We posted a short tutorial on YouTube with links to a few calculators that will estimate your daily caloric needs for you. But if you're aiming to lose weight, you need to consume fewer calories than your daily caloric needs. Often, plans will reduce daily caloric needs by 500 to 750 calories to achieve about 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss per week, about 0.5 to 1 kilogram weight loss per week. But you do want to be careful here. Dropping your calories or your energy intake too low can sabotage your metabolic rate and make it harder to lose weight, in addition to just making you miserable and hungry. You certainly don't want to go below about 1,200 calories per day for women, 1,500 calories per day for men, unless you're working with a healthcare professional who understands your specific circumstances and is advising a very low-calorie diet for some medical reason. So let's say you put your information into the calculator and it says you need 2,000 calories per day to maintain your body weight based on the information you put in. If you want to lose weight, you need to reduce your daily calorie intake and/or increase your energy expenditure through physical activity or exercise. In this case, a 500 calorie reduction would put you at 1,500 calories a day. And if you accurately counted the calories you consumed each day, you should achieve a gradual and sustainable weight loss with this approach. And yet, this is the dietary advice we've been giving people for decades, and it's clearly not working, or nearly 75% of Americans would not be overweight or obese. The latest statistics show nearly 42% of Americans are obese. So our model of eat less, exercise more isn't working. Now, we can get into hours of debate about why that is, but I would rather focus on solutions. Instead of focusing on calories, which people notoriously underestimate how much they actually consume and overestimate how much they expend through exercise and daily activities, focusing on real food, incorporating lots more vegetables, a good amount of fruit, high quality protein, and healthy fats is going to get you to better health faster and more enjoyably than depriving yourself on a standard American diet. We've got to cut out as many of the processed foods as possible, especially the highly palatable, ultra-processed foods that we know are designed to make us eat more of them. Counting calories accurately is difficult and time-consuming. So if you want to lose weight, I suggest trying one of the approaches we've discussed in this series. Almost all of them are based on eating more whole, unprocessed foods, increasing vegetable and fruit consumption, getting plenty of protein, and swapping unhealthy fats like refined oils for healthier options like olive oil and avocado. Start on one of these eating patterns without counting calories and see how your body responds. If you're not losing weight after a few weeks and that is part of your goals, then consider where you could make adjustments. Maybe it's as simple as being more mindful of your oil usage, since the calories in even healthy oils like olive oil can still add up quickly. You may go from drizzling your salad freehand to actually measuring a tablespoon of oil instead. No one wants to obsess about food the rest of their lives. In fact, one of the reasons people really like the GLP-1 receptor agonist drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro is that they quiet that constant and nagging voice that's always telling you you want to eat something. But I believe we can quiet that voice without the use of drugs too. It'll take some commitment and strategy. For one, reduce the amount of processed foods you bring into your home. For me, if there's ice cream in the freezer or sweets in the pantry, I am much more likely to have some ice cream that day than if I don't have it in the house and would have to seek it out. The activation energy required to get ice cream, if I don't have it readily available, is often enough to allow that craving to pass. And this isn't about never eating foods that you enjoy again. It's about understanding that foods we've been conditioned to want and crave are most likely not serving us. They don't provide good fuel. They don't provide antioxidants or vitamins or minerals, most likely. They aren't consistently improving your health. And therefore, we need to find a way to shift focus from them back to whole, healthful foods that move the needle towards better long-term health. So, after reviewing about 20 different eating patterns in this series on finding your food fit, here's my educated opinion on the best approaches. People love getting into the argument over calories in, calories out, and the best way to lose weight or optimize metabolic health. The bottom line is yes, how many calories you consume and expend matters, and your energy balance will determine if you're maintaining, losing, or gaining weight. But there are numerous factors that influence the calories out, energy expenditure side of that equation that we can't always anticipate or measure accurately. Therefore, I look at calories as not all the same. Yes, 500 calories from a candy bar provides the same absolute amount of energy as 500 calories from a healthy salad, but the long-term value is different. If calories were money, you could take that same $500 and spend it in very different ways, resulting in very different outcomes. You could quickly blow that $500 on short-term gratification, which is what consuming empty calories will get you. Or you could invest that $500 in something that is not as immediately pleasurable, but that's going to pay dividends in the future and result in a much better return on your investment. These are the choices we're making with the calories we choose to put into our bodies. Empty, non-nutrient dense food options may provide short-term pleasure, a dopamine hit, be highly palatable, but they cause harm in your body. Nutrient-dense, healthful foods provide calories and building blocks that repair and maintain your cells, your proteins, your muscles, your nerves, and your organs. This is a long-term investment, And the choice is yours about how you want to start thinking about that investment. It's not about depriving yourself and not having pleasure in life. Really, it's the opposite. It's about making choices now that allow you to feel good today and in the future, that prevent disease, that keep you out of the hospital and extend your healthy, independent years, and that save you a lot of pain in the future. It's never too late to have an impact on your future self. You don't have to turn the ship around in one day either. In fact, it's probably better if you don't. Let's review the main points from the series and these various approaches and put it all in perspective. Please note, I discuss nuanced considerations in each episode with regard to certain conditions, diseases, and other individual circumstances. What we're covering now is a summary, and it's not covering all of those considerations. If you have a specific health condition, it's always best to work with a qualified healthcare provider on dietary changes, particularly if you're on a medication, since this may need to be adjusted in the process. Episode 2 reviewed the Mediterranean diet and two closely related diets, the DASH diet and the MIND diet. The general principles of the Mediterranean diet include eating mostly plant-based foods, lots of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, fresh herbs, spices, and generous use of extra virgin olive oil. People eating in this pattern generally consume moderate amounts of seafood, some forms of dairy, red wine if you consume wine, and lower amounts of red meat and sweets. DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, and it was designed to lower blood pressure. But as we saw in our review of the benefits of many of these approaches we looked at, a lot of them are able to lower blood pressure. Though if blood pressure is your main focus or health concern, DASH can be a good approach for you. This eating pattern is similar to the Mediterranean diet, but further focuses on limiting sugar and saturated fats from things like full-fat dairy, fatty meats, and tropical oils. The MIND diet is a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diets and focuses on foods that are believed to slow cognitive decline with age. These include leafy greens, blueberries, whole grains and vegetables daily, nuts, beans, servings of poultry and fatty fish each week, replacing other oils and fats with olive oil, limiting sweets, red meat, and processed meats, among a few others. Though there are slight differences in the number of servings suggested and a few foods to emphasize or limit here and there, these three approaches generally promote many of the same principles. High intake of plant-based whole foods like vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, and whole grains, using good quality olive oil as the main fat source of the diet, moderate intake of fish, poultry, dairy products, and red wine, and low intake of red meat, saturated fat, and sweets. If you don't know where to start with these dietary approaches, I would start with one of these. They're going to shift you towards nutrient-dense whole foods, good protein options, and healthy fats. These can be combined with what we covered in episode 3, which was intermittent fasting. While we reviewed a variety of fasting approaches in episode 3, I focused largely on time-restricted eating, or TRE, which is an approach where you shorten your eating window in a 24-hour period to about 8 to 12 hours. Instead of consuming calories for 13 to 15 hours per day like most Americans do, you aim for at least 12 hours of fasting between your last calories of the evening, preferably dinner, and when you eat the next day. And as you're comfortable, you can extend that fasting window, working your way up to a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour eating window. This approach has numerous health benefits, including promoting metabolic flexibility, which is your body's ability to switch between using carbohydrates or sugar to burning fat for fuel. It can support moderate weight loss, improvements in blood pressure and blood lipids, reduced inflammation, and although this might not be one you can immediately feel or measure, fasting allows your body to perform important restorative processes, particularly as you sleep, that are going to remove old and damaged proteins and cells and keep your body running optimally. Intermittent fasting can be combined with any of the dietary approaches for additional health benefits. In episode 4, we covered plant-based diets, including vegan and different iterations of vegetarian. The health benefits of more plant-based approaches include weight loss, improved blood lipid profiles, better blood sugar regulation and reduced risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, slightly reduced risk of cancers, and reduced inflammation compared to omnivore diets. It is possible to consume an adequate and healthy vegan diet, but it requires a lot of knowledge and planning to be optimal. Plant proteins largely lack in certain essential amino acids and are less bioavailable, so you need more of them to maintain or increase muscle mass and get enough of those amino acid building blocks that we need for critical bodily functions. Certain vitamins and minerals are also of concern with a vegan approach, and particularly omega-3 fatty acids that are found in fatty fish should be supplemented with an algal option if you're choosing to go vegan. Many of the same concerns apply for strict vegetarians, but those consuming dairy, eggs, and/or fish have a leg up for key nutrients found in these foods. My take is if you're wanting to go more plant-based for health and/or sustainability reasons, it's better to go the flexitarian route where you're largely plant-based, but you consume some dairy, eggs, seafood, and/or occasional meat to improve the overall nutrient density of your diet. Again, these approaches can be combined with intermittent fasting for greater benefits. In episode 5, we covered several low to moderately low carbohydrate approaches like the Zone Diet, Atkins, South Beach, and slow carb. Experts define moderate carbohydrate as 25 to 45% of dietary energy from carbohydrates, whereas low carb is between 10 to 25% of energy from carbohydrates. Each of the approaches we covered in this episode has different macronutrient distribution ranges for carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and many of them also have different phases of the diet, like a severe carbohydrate restriction to start, followed by a reintroduction phase. I'm not a huge fan of diet plans that start with a jump start or a highly restrictive phase. While I'm not affiliated or necessarily promoting the Zone Diet, I do like that macronutrient distribution of about 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat, with some variation allowed for even lower carbohydrate and higher fat percentages in there. This is keeping your carbohydrates in check, getting plenty of grams of protein in, and allowing for plenty of healthy fats as well. These moderate and lower carbohydrate approaches are often recommended for individuals looking to better control blood sugar and insulin levels, and will be even more effective if combined with intermittent fasting. Episode 6 was all about the ketogenic diet. This is an approach that severely restricts carbohydrate intake to less than 10% of daily calories, or between about 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrates per day. It's very low carb, moderate protein, and high in fat. There are medical reasons that someone may be prescribed a ketogenic diet, but outside of those uses, a ketogenic diet is often promoted for metabolic health, particularly for those with insulin resistance. Ketosis is a metabolic state where your body is utilizing fat as its major fuel source or energy source instead of glucose or sugar. To achieve a state of ketosis, you have to very strictly limit your carbohydrate intake and in some instances your protein intake as well. There are ways to do this in healthier ways than others. So simply focusing on how many carbohydrates you're getting per day, but limiting intake of vegetables while consuming high amounts of saturated fat is likely not optimal, although technically you could be in ketosis following that pattern. Instead, if you focus on getting your carbohydrates from non-starchy vegetables and occasional berries, you eat high-quality protein, and you get a majority of your fats from healthy sources, this can really increase the health value of a ketogenic approach. And just like the others we've discussed, it can be combined with intermittent fasting. In episode 7, we reviewed Paleo, Primal, and the carnivore diet briefly. Paleo and Primal are quite restrictive in terms of the foods they eliminate. You're avoiding all processed foods, grains, legumes, dairy, alcohol, and refined sugars and oils like most seed oils. With Primal, some variations are allowed, such as ghee and fermented milk products. I'm not going to go back over all the specifics here, but in my view, Paleo, Primal, and Carnivore are essentially elimination diets where you don't reintroduce any foods back. And those are generally going to be hard to sustain in the long term. The whole point of an elimination diet like Whole30, AIP, the Low FODMAP that we've discussed, is to help you identify foods or groups of foods that you're sensitive to so you can enjoy foods that don't aggravate your system and avoid those that do. These approaches are particularly helpful if you struggle with gastrointestinal problems, joint pain, autoimmune diseases, chronic skin conditions, and the like. The Paleo, Primal, Carnivore approaches that remove large groupings of food and don't ever add them back in are extreme in my opinion, but for someone who struggles with unexplained symptoms or many food sensitivities, these approaches could help heal your system, but you should always have the goal of eventually reintroducing those restricted foods to have a more varied and balanced diet. So what is the best diet? There's a saying, the best diet is the one you'll stick to. But I don't want you to be on a lifelong diet or series of diets where you're feeling deprived. Our goal is to help you find a pattern of eating that just works for you. If you need to lose some weight, you need a plan that works with your metabolism, that provides a good amount of protein to help you feel satiated and to help you maintain lean muscle mass as you lose weight. You likely want to opt for a low or moderate carbohydrate plan and really focus on reducing processed food and simple carbohydrate consumption. Intermittent fasting is an easy way for many people to break habits of constantly eating and snacking, and the shorter eating window tends to result in less calorie consumption without much additional effort. So I recommend this for anyone looking to shed a few pounds, with the caveats that we already laid out in the fasting episode regarding groups of people who should not fast or those who should do so under supervision of a healthcare professional. If you have metabolic health concerns, my advice would be generally the same as for those looking to shed some pounds. We should all be aiming to consume less processed food, eat more whole foods, give our bodies time to rest and digest between meals, so less snacking, allow the body to get into deeper fasts at night by not consuming calories for several hours before you go to bed, get adequate sleep, consume plenty of water throughout the day. It's all common sense, but it's not common practice. And if it were, I know we could really make a dent in the 90+% of Americans that are metabolically unhealthy today. I hope this series has served its purpose and provided you with a lot of information that you can use to make better decisions about your eating patterns and your health. If you still have questions about any of these different dietary approaches that I haven't covered in a previous episode, please leave them in the comments section of our YouTube channel. I would love to continue the discussion there. You can find us at Nuchi Health, that's NUCHI Health, there and on most social platforms, including Instagram and X. Our next series is going to be all about metabolic health and will feature shorter episodes that answer targeted questions. I'll be posting on our social channels looking for questions from you regarding what you want to hear about on the topic of metabolic health. So follow us on our social channels so you can interact with us for those types of requests. Thank you for listening today. I hope you learned something new, that you have enough information to decide if you want to try one of these different dietary patterns, and that you have the tools to take the next steps when you're ready. And if you learned something helpful or enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our social accounts, and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Those interactions help us grow and help us make a bigger impact. I've also linked my Ko-fi page in the show notes where you can make a contribution to the show if you'd like to support us in that way. Thank you for being here, for your desire to learn and improve your health, and for letting us be part of your health journey. I'll see you soon.